The sun was too bright. That was the first thing Elias noticed. The way the light caught the dust motes dancing over his mahogany desk. It was a mundane, beautiful Tuesday morning. He was annoyed because his stapler had jammed, and he had a 1 p.m. meeting he hadn't prepared for. He didn't have a recorder then. He didn't have a plan. He just had a cup of lukewarm coffee and a sense of profound boredom. Then the world growled. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a vibration in his teeth. He looked at his coffee. The surface of the liquid was dancing in perfect concentric circles. What the? Then came the roar. It sounded like a freight train was tearing through the drywall. The floor didn't just shake, it bucked. Elias was thrown from his chair, his chin slamming into the edge of the desk. The sharp copper taste of blood filled his mouth. The first time he would taste it, though far from the last. "Earthquake!" someone screamed. It might have been Sarah. Elias scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Panic, pure and blinding, took over. He did everything wrong. He ran for the elevators. The hallway was a war zone. Ceiling tiles were falling like oversized confetti, snapping over people's shoulders. He saw Mr. Henderson standing frozen by the water cooler, staring at a crack widening in the floor as if it were a magic trick. "Move!" Elias yelled, but his own voice was drowned out by the grinding of concrete. He reached the elevator bank and slammed his thumb against the button. In his mind, he just needed to get down. He needed the ground. The door slid open with a cheerful ding that felt absurdly out of place. He stepped inside. 3 others followed. A delivery guy he didn't know and 2 women from accounting. "Wait!" a woman screamed from the hallway. Elias hit the close door button. He felt a surge of shame, but the primal urge to survive was louder. The doors hissed shut. For 3 seconds, there was a terrifying humming silence. Then the cable snapped. It wasn't like the movies. There was no long, dramatic scream. There was just a sudden, sickening lift in his stomach as gravity vanished, followed by a sound so loud it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a physical blow. Darkness. Absolute crushing weight. The smell of ozone and hot metal. Elias felt his ribs cave in. He tried to breathe, but he only inhaled pulverized stone. He felt the cold realization that he was dying in a dark box beneath tons of steel. He thought of his mother. He thought of the unfinished coffee on his desk. "I don't want to go," he thought. "Please not like this." The pressure on his chest became unbearable. His vision flickered, turned red, and then faded into a heavy velvet black. Snap! Elias gasped, bolting upright. A sharp pain shot through his chest, but when he looked down, his shirt was dry. No blood, no dust. The room was silent. The sun hit the glass vase on his nightstand at the exact same angle. From the kitchen, the soft drip, drip, drip of the automatic coffee maker signaled the start of the day. He sat there for a long time, his hands shaking so violently he had to sit on them. "A dream," he whispered. "Just a nightmare." He checked his phone. Tuesday, January 26th. 8 a.m. He got up, showered, and went to work. He sat at his desk. He struggled with his jammed stapler. He felt a strange, lingering sense of unease, but the sun was too bright for ghosts. At 11:41 a.m., he looked at his coffee cup. The surface of the liquid began to dance in perfect concentric circles. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. No, he breathed. Not again. And then the world growled. The second death was worse because he saw it coming. The third was worse because he fought harder and still failed. By the 10th, Elias wasn't screaming anymore. He was vibrating with a cold, jagged terror. He sat at his desk during loop number 14, staring at the digital clock. 11:30 a.m. He had 11 minutes. His hands were raw from clawing at rubble in the previous life. Rubble that didn't exist yet. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the small digital voice recorder he usually used for meeting notes. He clicked the red button. "I'm not crazy," he whispered into the mic, his voice cracking. "I'm Elias Thorne. This is the 14th time I've lived these 3 hours. In 11 minutes, the San Andreas Fault is going to rip this city open. I've tried the elevator. Don't take the elevator. I've tried the stairs. The south ones collapse first. If I don't survive this time, if I don't wake up, tell someone I tried." He tucked the recorder into his inner jacket pocket. It felt like an anchor. He stood up. He didn't wait for the shaking this time. He walked over to Sarah's desk. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me," he said, his voice eerily calm. "There's going to be an earthquake, a big one. Right now, I need you to stand up and walk to the north exit. Don't grab your purse. Don't look at your phone. Just go." Sarah looked up, a confused smile tugging at her lips. "Elias, is this a drill? I didn't get an email." "It's not a drill," he barked. The office went silent. Coworkers peered over their cubicles. "Everyone, out the north doors, now." A few people laughed. Someone made a joke about Elias needing more caffeine. He watched the clock. 11:35 a.m. "Please," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Just trust me." He spent the next 6 minutes begging. He managed to convince 4 people to follow him. They stood in the hallway, looking at him with pity, waiting for the punchline of a joke that wasn't coming. Then, the P-wave arrived. The building didn't just shake, it groaned like a dying beast. The windows shattered outward, a million diamonds of glass raining down on the street below. "Move!" Elias shouted, shoving the group toward the north stairwell. They ran. For the first time, they were ahead of the collapse. They reached the 4th floor landing when the main shock hit. The world tilted 45 degrees. Elias slammed into the wall, the recorder in his pocket digging into his ribs. "Keep going," he yelled at Sarah, who was paralyzed, staring at a crack that had just swallowed a vending machine. He grabbed her, practically throwing her down the next flight of stairs. They reached the 2nd floor. He could see the daylight of the lobby. He could see the street. "I'm going to do it," he thought. "I'm going to save them." But he had forgotten about the marble pillars in the lobby. In loop number 4, he had seen them fall, but he hadn't accounted for the timing if he arrived early. As they burst into the lobby, the ceiling gave way. A 3-ton slab of decorative marble swung down like a scythe. Elias saw it coming. He shoved Sarah forward, feeling the wind of the slab's descent whistle past his ear. He made it. They were on the sidewalk. Elias let out a sob of triumph. He reached for his recorder to log the victory. Entry 14. We're out. We're. He didn't see the power transformer. It snapped off the pole directly above them, heavy and humming with lethal voltage. It hit the flooded gutter at his feet. The last thing Elias heard was the sizzle of electricity and Sarah's scream. Snap. 8 a.m. Elias didn't move. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His heart wasn't racing anymore. It was heavy, like a stone in his chest. He reached for the recorder on his nightstand. He hit play. Static. Empty air. The recording hadn't followed him back. Only the memory remained. He sat up and cleared his throat. He pressed record. Entry 15, he said, his voice sounding older, harder. The north exit is clear, but watch for the transformer outside the lobby at 11:43. Sarah, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry about the shove. I'll try to be gentler this time. He stood up and began to dress. He didn't prepare for his 1 p.m. meeting. He didn't prepare for the rest of his life. He just prepared for the next 3 minutes of the end of the world. The sun hit the glass vase on the nightstand, and Elias woke up with the taste of copper and ozone already on his tongue. He didn't gasp this time. He didn't even blink. He just reached for the recorder. Entry 212, he muttered, his voice a flat, tired monotone. The city exit is a trap. Don't take the bridge. The seismic wave hits the supports at 11:45, and the gridlock turns the 101 into a graveyard. I spent the last loop watching 300 cars slide into the bay. Note to self. Stay in the building. The building is predictable. The building I can solve. He dressed in silence. He wore sneakers now. No more dress shoes. He didn't bother with the tie. He spent the morning sitting in his car in the parking lot watching the clock. He had realized around loop number 50 that the before didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the during. At 11:38 a.m., he walked into the lobby. He looked like a ghost in a business suit. He knew exactly where the floor would buckle, so he walked a zigzag pattern across the marble, a path that looked insane to the casual observer, but followed the future lines of structural integrity. "Hey, Elias! Late for the meeting?" a coworker called out. Elias didn't answer. He was counting seconds. He stood by the heavy structural pillar near the mailroom. He knew that when the first jolt hit, this pillar would stay upright for exactly 64 seconds longer than the others. 40, he whispered. 39. He clicked the recorder again. I've started thinking of them as the doomed. It's easier that way. If I think of them as people who like movies and have kids, I stop moving. I have to be a machine. I have to be the one thing in this building that doesn't break. The hum began. The coffee in a nearby trash can began to ripple. "Here we go," he said. The world exploded. The sound was a physical weight, a wall of noise that shattered the eardrums of the people standing near the windows. Elias didn't flinch. He leaned into the vibration, his body swaying with the frequency of the quake. He watched a massive light fixture fall, missing his head by an inch because he had stepped 2 inches to the left 3 seconds prior. He grabbed a woman, someone he hadn't tried to save before, and shoved her under a reinforced mail sorting table. "Stay there. Don't move until the 3rd shock." He turned and ran toward the basement. He had a theory. If he could shut off the main gas valve before the secondary tremors hit, he could stop the fire that usually claimed the survivors in the aftermath. He navigated the collapsing hallway like a dancer, leaping over fissures before they even opened, ducking under falling pipes he knew were loose. He reached the valve. It was rusted shut. He grabbed a pipe wrench he'd stashed there in loop number 209. He threw his entire weight against it. "Come on," he hissed, his knuckles bleeding. "Give me this. Just give me this one win." The metal groaned. The valve turned. A hiss of escaping pressure signaled his success. He leaned against the cold iron, a jagged laugh escaping his throat. For the first time in 200 lives, the building wouldn't burn. Then he heard it, a sound he hadn't heard in any other loop. A low, wet growl of rushing water. He looked up. By turning the gas valve, he had increased the pressure on a weakened water main. The pipe above him didn't just leak, it disintegrated. A wall of freezing, pressurized water slammed him into the concrete wall. He struggled, gasping, but the basement was filling too fast. The debris he'd avoided earlier was now a barricade, trapping him in a rising tomb. He held the recorder above the water line as long as he could. Entry 212. The gas is off. But watch the water. There's always a trade-off. The universe. It doesn't want them to live. It really, really doesn't want. The water surged over his head. Snap. The sun hit the glass vase on the nightstand. Elias looked at the ceiling. He felt the phantom sensation of water in his lungs, the cold sting of failure. He reached for the recorder. Entry 213, he whispered. The basement is awash. Let's try the roof. Would you like to see how he handles the chaos on the roof? Or skip forward to the point where he begins to find a way to communicate with the next version of himself? The sun hit the glass vase on the nightstand, but for the first time in 500 loops, Elias didn't wait for his eyes to adjust. He moved with the terrifying efficiency of a man who had lived this morning for a decade. Entry 512, he said, his voice a rasping ghost of itself. This is the one. I've mapped every fracture, every falling tile, and every heartbeat in this building. I've stopped trying to save everyone. You can't save everyone. To save the most, you have to choose who dies. God, forgive me for the math. He didn't go to his desk. He didn't wait for the coffee. He spent the morning moving objects in the lobby, shifting a heavy planter 3 feet to the left, jamming a fire door open with a stapler, cutting the power to the elevators at exactly 11 a.m. Each action was a ripple he was sending into a pond he knew was about to be hit by a boulder. At 11:40 a.m., Elias stood in the center of the lobby. He wasn't hiding, he wasn't running. He was holding the recorder, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at Sarah. "Sarah," he called out. She turned, startled by the intensity in his eyes. "In 30 seconds, I want you to jump toward that planter. Don't look back, just jump." "Elias, you're acting really strange." "20 seconds," he said, his voice dropping. He pressed the record button one last time. "If this works, I won't be there to hear this. To whoever finds this, I didn't just watch them die. I learned how to make them live." The roar began. It was the familiar, soul-crushing sound of the world tearing itself apart. But this time, Elias didn't look at the ceiling. He watched the patterns. The first jolt hit. Sarah screamed, but Elias was already there, his hand firm on her shoulder, steering her into the dead zone he'd spent 100 lives identifying. The planter he had moved caught the falling light fixture. The jammed fire door provided the only exit that hadn't buckled. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, shoved a man here, tripped a woman there so she fell into a safe alcove, his body a blur of calculated motion. He was the conductor of a symphony of survival. The main shock arrived. The building groaned, a massive structural beam snapping above the main exit. This was the moment. In every other loop, this beam crushed the crowd. Elias didn't run. He dived under the beam, not to hide, but to use his own body to wedge a heavy metal filing cabinet he'd dragged into place earlier. He became the final calculated piece of the puzzle. He felt the weight of the world descend. It wasn't the quick, merciful crunch of the elevator or the cold drown of the basement. It was a slow, agonizing pressure. He felt his spine scream, his ribs give way, but the cabinet held. The exit remained open. "Go!" He wheezed, blood spraying the recorder in his hand. "Run!" He watched them. Sarah, Mr. Henderson, the delivery guy, the women from accounting. A stream of people poured through the gap he had created, spilling out onto the street as the lobby collapsed behind them. He was pinned, his lower half vanished beneath the debris, but he could see through the gap. He saw Sarah reach the sidewalk. He saw her turn around, weeping, reaching out toward the ruins. She was alive. They were all alive. The dust began to settle. For the first time, Elias felt the cold wind of the aftermath instead of the heat of the reset. The silence wasn't the silence of the bedroom at 8 a.m. It was the heavy morning silence of a city in ruins. He looked at the recorder. The amber light was flickering, dying. I think I'm staying," he whispered into the mic. He waited for the snap. He waited for the sun to hit the vase. He waited for the smell of coffee. It didn't come. Instead, he felt the warmth of a human hand on his. He looked up through the rubble. It was Sarah. She was reaching through the debris, her fingers catching his. "I've got you," she sobbed. "Elias, stay with me. I've got you." Elias let out a long, shuddering breath. He let the recorder slip from his fingers. He didn't need to tell the story anymore. For the first time in 500 days, the clock moved to 11:44 a.m. The loop was broken. He was finally allowed to die. Or, for the first time, he was finally allowed to live. The dust began to settle, thick and tasting of pulverized lime. For the first time, the silence wasn't the silence of the bedroom at 8 a.m. It was the heavy morning silence of a city in ruins. Elias was pinned, his legs crushed beneath the structural beam he'd braced with the filing cabinet. But he could see the sky. A jagged triangle of blue peered through the wreckage of the lobby. Beyond the gap, he saw Sarah. She was standing on the sidewalk, chest heaving, staring at the pile of stone that should have been her grave. "I did it," Elias wheezed, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the recorder. 11:46 a.m., entry 512, the clock. It's still moving. Then he heard it, the sound of sirens, real, distant, wailing sirens. In 500 lives, he had never lived long enough to hear the sirens. Footsteps crunched on the glass. A pair of heavy boots appeared in the gap. "I found someone," a voice shouted. "Over here! He's alive!" Strong hands reached through the debris. They cleared the rocks with a frantic energy. Elias felt a surge of pure, agonizing joy as they pulled him upward. The pain was blinding, but it was new pain. It was the pain of a man who had a future. They laid him on the asphalt of the street. Sarah ran to him, gripping his hand, her face a mask of soot and tears. "You saved us," she sobbed. "Elias, I don't know how you knew, but you saved everyone." He looked up at her, a weak smile breaking through the grime. He looked at his watch. 11:55 a.m. He had survived for nearly 15 minutes. The world was continuing. People were crying, the sun was shining, and the air was filled with the smell of smoke and salt. He was going to a hospital. He was going to see Wednesday. "I'm free," he whispered, tears carving clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "I'm finally free." High above, a rhythmic creaking sound began. Elias looked up. The skyscraper across the street, a gleaming spire of glass and steel that had survived the initial quake, was groaning. Its foundation, liquefied by the secondary tremors, finally gave way. The massive building didn't fall fast. It leaned, a slow, graceful arc of doom that blotted out the sun. The shadow raced across the street, swallowing Sarah, swallowing the paramedics, swallowing Elias. "No," he gasped, reaching out his hand as the shadow turned the world to midnight. "No, not like this. I did everything right." Sarah looked up, her eyes wide with a final reflected terror. The sound was a roar that swallowed the universe. 1,000 tons of glass descended like a guillotine. Elias felt the cold rush of air, the shadow touching his skin, and then, snap. Elias bolted upright in bed. The room was silent. The sun hit the glass vase on his nightstand at the exact same angle. From the kitchen, the soft, rhythmic drip, drip, drip of the automatic coffee maker began. He sat there, his fingers digging into the mattress until his knuckles turned white. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He slowly reached out and picked up the recorder from the nightstand. It was pristine, empty. He pressed the red button. "Entry 513, he said, his voice as cold and hollow as a grave. "The building across the street falls at 11:56. I need to clear the block. I need more time." He stood up and began to dress,